How about if I just start at the beginning? you could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, episode 46, brought to you by buyafarm.com. I'm Terry Peer with Don Higgins. It is January 10th. Don, how you doing tonight?
Good. How you, Terry?
I'm tired. We both kind of said that both of us were wore out. It's just a brutal time of the year for us as far as how busy we are. And but we're still, you know, we got a lot of feedback from people still wanting us to keep doing this every week. Otherwise, both of us would probably be in bed right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I've been on the road and got home late last night. Going to hit the road again tomorrow, so I need a good night's sleep.
It's really, really hard for we got just a lot cooking right now, both with Chasing Giants, the podcast, Higgins Outdoors, Real World, and you even made a social media post about it, I believe, this morning. We're trying our best to respond to everybody, but it's just please bear with us. We'll get to it. It's just taking us a little bit of time. We're really out there trying to work our tails off to help people right now.
Well, we've never had to deal with this level of contact from people asking questions and just, orders on the website. I think there was one day I looked at at my Real World email account, and I had 454 emails in less than 24 hours.
Yeah. And for those who don't understand, that's not only questions from customers, that's internal dialogue that is amongst the Real World team trying to make decisions and run the business, but it's also the level of orders. We had over 400 orders in a 24-hour period in December, which is just unprecedented for us this time of year. Usually our busy season doesn't cut until spring.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it at all. And, you and I both have multiple email accounts. You have a full-time job, actually overseeing a management position where you're overseeing a lot of other people. So you got more than really a full-time job. And then, your help with Real World and Chasing Giants and all you do. I'm sure you don't get to watch much TV, and I'm about in the same boat.
Yeah, I gave up on TV a long time ago, but that's okay. There's nothing on there worth watching. So
that's for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about this week. We're going to hit a lot of different topics tonight to try to bounce around. I want to talk about what we got planned on this week because there's going to be an opportunity to come out and see you, and not sure if I'm going to make it there or not with a trade show. We are going to spend a little bit of time talking about some product releases that Real World's coming out this week. It's technically, for those of you who are listening to the podcast right now, it's actually up on the website. I got that done earlier today. But to talk a little bit deeper about what's going on, the plans moving forward, and why we're doing it this way. We don't have an ATA show to really talk about that this year. And then I'm really excited about the new series, the second edition to that, Lessons Learned from a Research Herd. I got a lot of good feedback from it. I don't know about you, but let's start a little bit of tonight's episode talking about what you have planned going this week and you heading out tomorrow. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I'm going to head to Ohio in the morning, going to look at properties on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is the Northeast Ohio Sportsman Show at Mount Hope, Ohio. and I'll be speaking there each of those 3 days, doing seminars, have a booth there at that show. Then I haven't decided on Saturday evening when the show's over. I haven't decided if I'm coming home or if I'm going to stay in Ohio. I've probably got a dozen properties or so in Ohio to visit with consulting clients on. So I may stay another couple of days and knock a couple more of those out.
That's probably going to depend on the weather and what it's doing. If it's a good opportunity to look at those, I would guess.
Right. I mean, I try to make it home on Sundays, but if I'm already there and I've got so much work there, I may just stay.
So if you're in Northeast Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, anywhere around that area, if you want to come out and meet Don and talk to him a little bit and listen to the seminars, you can just Google Northeast Ohio Sportsman Show, I believe is what you can find it under. It's in New Hope, Ohio. It's not a far drive from Pittsburgh or Cleveland, but I've been to it. It's a really nice show, excited for everybody to get out and intermingle a little bit. We've all been cooped up a little bit. I won't know if I'm going to make it up till probably about Tuesday, so I might be able to meet everybody up there. Hoping to. We'll see how the plans progress. We did get an update about the trade show in Shipshawana that we were going to do a live podcast from. That actually got rescheduled, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be in mid-February, but they said the health department was giving them so much grief about everyone wearing masks and such that they've postponed it to April. And I don't know if things are going to change much between February and April, but right now they pushed it back to April.
All right, so we'll get that updated on the Real World website and try to keep informing everybody as we know as these shows kind of I know the promoters and the planners for these trade shows are really trying hard to get us in there, but sometimes their hands are tied by the people outside of the trade show organization, so we'll keep you updated on that. Before we talk about the Real World new products for this year, I promised at least 25 people that I would put you on the spot tonight and ask you about the big news that probably would have been released at the ATA show this year. But one of the bow manufacturers, the crossbow manufacturers, released that they now have a crossbow that will hold 2 different cocked bolts that can be shot like a double barrel shotgun. So I promised a couple people, I told them we weren't going to spend a lot of time on it because it wouldn't take either one of us to give our opinion of it. But I told them I promised that I would ask you what you thought about it.
I think they're just trying to get me fired up, Terry. I think
that's all right. I think everybody that knows you already knows the answer to this.
Yeah, for sure. I'm, we said it last week, bow hunting was not meant to be easy. And yet the manufacturers just keep pushing and pushing and pushing to make it easier and easier. What do they want to do? Turn bow season into gun season? And, the archery harvest, at least in my home state of Illinois, it just continues to grow and grow and grow as the equipment gets more advanced. The seasons get longer for archery. It's basically gun season is a dying thing around here, believe it or not. I used to be able to drive around on opening morning of firearms season, and there would be trucks parked just absolutely everywhere. And it's just not like that today. I'll drive around and maybe see 5 or 6 trucks, but during bow season, any Saturday in bow season, there's a whole lot more hunters in the woods, and basically what they're doing is they're trying to make it an easier sport to allow the gun hunters to hunt during archery season. But the real drawback to all this is at some point, deer hunting is a way to manage the deer herd. When archery was a low success rate prospect or sport, you had the long seasons, and now the success rate is so much higher that it's become a real management tool and a very efficient management tool. I'm just afraid that we keep pushing and we're going to lose length of our archery season. So, I mean, I think this is an absolutely ridiculous product. I would personally want nothing to do with it, but what are they going to come up with next, I guess, is my question.
And everyone who's listened to the podcast before knows that I am pro Crossbow. It's kind of something that we disagree with a little bit, but I am not in favor of a season-long Crossbow season. I fully support a Crossbow season independent of archery, much more compressed and much more controlled. And I challenged your friend Todd Hewing, and I know he doesn't even listen to most of these episodes, but if you go and look at one of the posts that he made earlier this week, where he said that these companies are trying to make hunting easier, I challenged him on that statement. And I really don't think the manufacturers care one way or another. I think you got to take a step back and say a company is going to develop a product and put it on the market for one of two reasons inside of they're there to make money. Any business that's out there, whether it's a crossbow manufacturer, a tree stand manufacturer, their goal is to make money. That's the business that they're in. But what drives their product decisions is I'm going to try to do something good for the herd, or I'm going to try to do not care about that at all and just try to sell more product at whatever expense it is. And I think that's a big difference in the industry, because I challenge anybody to give me one advantage that this is going to give the deer herd. And it's simply, I really encourage everybody listening to really think about this. I mean, it's going to, first of all, it's probably going to wound more deer than anything, because there's going to be the people that's going to try to pull both triggers at the same time. There's going to be people taking pot shots. It's going to wound more deer than it's going to increase the kill. But I strongly suggest that the hunters that listen to this, that care about the integrity of the archery season in their deer herd, need to call or contact their DNRs. I hope that these states step up and change the game laws to not allow any device for an archery or crossbow season that would hold two cocked arrows or bolts. And this thing is an absolute insult to the archery industry, in my opinion. And I'm pro crossbow.
It's all about the money.
It's all it
exactly
is.
What it is.
So I'm done with it. It made me mad when it came out this week, and I'm not going to hash around a lot of all of you all that asked us to comment on it knew what our position was going to be anyway. But I want to build a little bit on it, because product releases like this, I think, kind of taint the desire of a lot of good companies in the industry. And there still is a lot of good companies in the industry that want to come out with new products. Now, granted, their business is to make money, but what drives the product development and product releases out there, there's a lot of good companies and a lot of good products that get released every year. So I don't want to, say everything that comes out is garbage. Obviously, we have new products coming out. But from you as a business owner in the outdoor industry, what is your driving factor when you sit down? Because with us at Real World, it's not just a one-year test and let's take something to market. We're going to talk tonight about the pilot program. What drives, when you and Wes and Dwayne sit down and say, we need to think about this, what drives that decision for a new product for you guys?
Well, first of all, what's on the market that compares with it? If it's something that it's not even hit the market yet, then that's a real opportunity. But for us, we're just trying to be the best land managers that we can, and that means providing the best nutrition for the deer on our properties, whether it's through a food plot or a feeder or whatever. So we're just looking to push that envelope as far as providing the best nutrition, the best cover, the best habitat. And if there's something out there that we think is better than our product, well, I'm going to be using it. I want my farm to be the best that it can be for whitetails. So,
But
Real World is just kind of an offshoot of that.
Taking that back to the comment I made earlier, though, what drives that new product development for our business is, we're not going to do something we're going to lose money at, but at the same time, we're driving our product about what can make us better land managers, better habitat for those deer, not what's going to necessarily shoot two projectiles out of a weapon at the same time to try to just sell money. And those of us who kind of attacked for the miscanthus, saying that, it was invasive and they couldn't believe it, they just have no clue what goes behind the product development and the years spent, and why we bring something to market. It's truly granted, we'll be the first ones. We're trying to run a business, trying to make money, but we are trying to bring products to the market that no one else has that makes this deer herd and the environment in which the deer live in better. And I think that's the difference. And there's other companies that are right along the same lines as we are.
Yeah, and you use the term pilot program, Terry, and I think probably a lot of our listeners don't understand what's that mean. And
that's the next question for you. I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Well, at Real World, we have a series of tests that we go through with any new product that we're even thinking about. And, it starts out on our own properties. We get an idea, we test it on our own properties. If it does well there, then we have, a small core group of land managers from around the country that we worked with for years in different regions of the country. Some of them have been on our pro staff for years and things like that, that we will then move those products to a little larger group in different regions of the country for testing. And if that comes back positive, then we move on to the pilot program. And the pilot program is where we release some of the product. It's not a full-blown new product release. It's a very limited release that we get out there to our customer base for more feedback. And just because something makes it to the pilot program doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a product that we're going to carry every year.
Right.
But that is kind of the final step that determines that. It just gives us a whole lot more feedback from a lot wider geographic area. We may not see an issue on my farm in Illinois, your farm in Kentucky, but, take that product to, say, Minnesota, for example, or New York or Georgia, and an issue that we didn't have, there may be an issue there, and we want to know about it.
So I want to stop here and just clarify a couple things before we start talking specifics. If the listeners will go back and watch Pro Talk Outdoors or John Mulligan or Lethal Mission, about this time last year through March, they were talking about planting test product for us last year. And that test product, we haven't given up on it, but that's not a priority right now. And those who, so remember that just because it makes it to the next step, we don't release it as a full-fledged product. Every other company in the outdoor industry, when they got to the level of testing that we're at with this pilot program, the two products that we're going to talk about tonight, they would have already released it as a full-blown product and started, going crazy with it. We're offering it to the public. We think that it serves a big need with a lot of land managers with certain criteria, but it's still going to be in a controlled release of how we're letting this go out. So there's going to be a limited number of bags available, not only online, but through our dealer network. And there's going to be a max quantity that anybody can get. So we're not going to have one person gobble up, because you and I both know that once this thing gets out, there's going to be land managers that are going to try to buy every single bit that we have.
Yep.
So
yeah, it does us no good as far as feedback if one person has it all. And that's why when you go to order these products on the website, you're going to see a limit. You're not going to be able to order but a certain amount. And the reason for that is we want the feedback from as many different people as wide an area as possible.
So one last thing to clarify about the pilot program that I know people are going to ask, so I'm just going to throw it out there on the table and be as transparent as Don and I can be. The question is going to be, why didn't we release miscanthus on a pilot program? And the answer is very simple. We traveled around to universities that did more studies and more analysis and a much longer test than what one pilot year would have been for us, that we got the data that we needed to know that this stuff grows non-invasive. It won't spread from the Gulf of Mexico up into Canada. So there was so much university study done that we were picking the specific varieties, and once we found the variety that we wanted, we looked at the university studies, and it took the place of the program that we're doing this year. So just so everybody knows, it's the honest truth. We didn't need to do it because of how much time universities had spent with this, right?
Absolutely. You and I spent time in airports in October, a couple falls ago.
We weren't hunting.
During hunting season. Looking at miscanthus, we flew to some different universities, and I would have much rather been deer hunting, but
right,
we wanted to make sure of what we was releasing, and we wanted to see it firsthand, not just in a picture.
All right. So without further ado, the two new products that are being released, and they're on our website right now, that you can go out under the 2021 pilot program and the spring food plots, is an Enlist soybean blend and a Nutri-Crave corn. So I want to first talk about the Enlist soybeans, Don. Why was this a big push for us over the last 4 years trying to get to this point that we're at today?
Well, it all boils down to weed control. We got so many requests for an Enlist soybean. I mean, dozens and dozens of requests every year because people were having trouble with resistant weeds in their real world soybeans, which, the real world soybeans are glyphosate tolerant or Roundup ready, whichever you want to call it. But there were certain weeds like water hemp, mare's tail, for example, that glyphosate was no longer killing. And so a lot of our customer soybean plots were just full of water hemp or mare's tail. And it didn't matter how many times they sprayed them, the glyphosate just wasn't going to cut it. This Enlist soybean will allow the food plotter to spray 3 different chemicals on their soybeans to control weeds. You'll still be able to spray the glyphosate or Roundup. You'll be able to spray Liberty, which is glufosinate, and then 2,4-D can also be sprayed on them.
Yep.
So it gives you 3 different chemicals to spray on these soybeans versus the one chemical with the current Gen 2 soybeans.
So the tough part about this is we're setting on a Gen 2 soybean right now that's been the flagship of Real World for many years. And I don't know outside of weed control that we would want to change anything with that soybean. I mean, we've gotten it to the point that we'll put it up against anything and kick its butt. But this is such a big problem that's going to continue to evolve. We had to react to the market needs that you all sent to us. The problem that we have is that there's only certain pockets in the United States that this is a problem with. So I have 2 different food plots this year, one in Kentucky that I have no problem with, that Gen 2 soybeans are fine. I can spray it with Roundup and it'll kill everything in it. I go up to the lease in Illinois this year that we had, and there's water hemp that's almost choked out the soybeans. So don't worry about the Gen 2 soybeans, all of you guys in the southeast and the northeast that still love this product. It's still going to be available. You're still going to buy it. For those in the Midwest, out to Kansas, Iowa, and then going up north that have these weed-resistant problems, our goal was to take the traits and the kind of the characteristics of those Gen 2 soybeans and move them into an Enlist trait bean. And walk us through, Don, a little bit about what those traits are and kind of all the testing that we did to get there.
Well, the two primary traits that we looked at was shatter resistance. You don't want those soybeans plants shattering or the pod shattering, open dropping the soybeans onto the ground, into the mud or snow or whatever. And the other thing was we wanted a very high oil soybean, and the combination of both of those, we had to look at a lot of different varieties of soybeans to find them. And I think we've got a pretty good product, but we want to hear, the feedback from across the country.
Right. So, your alternative to this, and you're going to go on, everybody's going to go on the website and kind of look at the pricing. This product is priced higher than the Gen 2 beans, and it's not because we're trying to make more money off of this. People have to also understand that this still is a licensed product, that we have to, there's royalties and everything to be part of that family of trade of bean that has to be paid, and obviously the quantity that we're selling in a pilot program is a little bit higher. Now, you can go out and reach out to guys like Josh Pretzer and the guys that are true row crop farmers, and they'll tell you that a little bit more on the bag of bean that these things are going to be cheaper in the long run than a chemical plan that you would have to do with like a pre-emergent and all the different chemicals you'd have to use ahead of time with trying to stay with the Gen 2 if you have those Roundup tolerant plants.
Yeah, I think, the Real World's the company that took the ag industry and kind of brought it to the food plot industry. And that's what we're doing with these Enlist soybeans. This science has been there in the ag industry for a few years, but nobody has brought it to the food plot industry.
Yeah, nobody's been willing to put in test strips and do the tissue analysis. I posted a picture today on the Real World social media site of us this fall walking through getting tissue analysis from 8 different test sites for Enlist beans. So no one's taken the initiative to say, okay, inside of all of these families and different group numbers of Enlist soybeans, what gives us the pod production, the shatter resistance, and the higher oil that we need to still be our flagship soybean type product out of these. So we think we've gotten it there, and it's going to be released. So visit the website to learn more. I'm going to be doing some training stuff throughout the week to talk a little bit more specifics about the blend and what's in it. But you can go and start reading more on the website and watch for the social media this week. Now, to take a project a little bit longer, you've been working on this almost as long as I've known you, and that is a true corn that has a benefit. So this has been a long project for you, hasn't it?
Well, we've been looking at different corn varieties for probably at least 10 years. And we just couldn't find anything that stood out from, the typical ag corn that you could get from your neighbor who's a farmer or any farm supply place that sells corn seed. But boy, we hit on something, and I'm telling you what, this one really excites me more than the Enlist soybeans. We call it Nutri-Crave corn, and it's a corn that when I grew it on my farm this year, in fact, I was in the plot today, and just to check on, how much was left, if the deer have eaten it all yet. But I'm telling you what, they tear it up. And the reason for it is it's higher in nutrients than, the regular field corn that the farmers are growing. And when we pulled some samples earlier in the fall and sent them into the lab for analysis, I pulled some off of my neighbor's cornfield, which was right next to my plot. Pulled a couple ears out of there, and we shelled that out and shelled a couple ears from the test plot for comparison. And boy, the difference was day and night. The field corn was 6.8% protein level. Ours was 11.2.
That's really high for corn.
Oh,
that's really high for corn.
Over 8. It's ridiculous.
Right.
you just hardly don't ever see it over 8, but to be over 11, that's just incredible. And the deer know it too. I'm telling you, they'll walk through regular field corn to get to this stuff. And then the fat levels was 4 or 5 times higher. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I think the fat level in the regular field corn was about 3%, and in this corn it was 12.
Right.
When you figure the calories in this corn will have, the Nutri-Crave corn will have 225% higher calories than the same amount of regular field corn. So you're getting, if a deer comes out and he eats a handful of Nutri-Crave corn, he's getting more than double the calories if he'd ate the same amount of field corn. And there's a whole list of other nutrients that this corn was higher in. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but copper was one, zinc was one, phosphorus. There's a reason we've named it Nutri-Crave corn, and I'm pretty sure this Nutri-Crave is going to make it through the pilot program with flying colors and become a regular product at Real World. I know I've never been a big fan of planting corn in my plots because it's just such a takes more critical care than soybeans. Soybeans are really easy to grow, but with corn, the spacing's got to be good. You need good fertility. Yeah. Takes a lot of nitrogen, just things like that. But I planted it this year, and I'm telling you what, I'm sure glad I did, and so are my deer. And I'll be having a plot of it every year from now on.
Well, but this wasn't something that we just stumbled across. We've been searching for this and searching for this and searching for this, and there's always been some, try this, it might work, and we would do, and it's not worth us going down that venture. When we saw, and you even told me at one point, just the amount of pressure tracks and deer that were in it early, even before we did the final tissue analysis this fall, that they were using it a whole lot more. Now, so this wasn't something we just stumbled about. This, again, has been, good grief, a 10-year project for Don. So, I want to, though, caution people, for the beginner food plotter, we get a lot of the questions of the guys that are just starting. Just know that corn's tough. You got to know what you're doing. You got to have the right equipment. So for the beginner food plot, this might not be the right product for you. For the guys that grow corn and are successful with it, not only for deer, Don, but the thing that I think that's probably going to end up happening is the guys that are growing this for cattle feed might want to check this out too and plant an acre of it to see what how it compares feeding their cattle. But that's a different story altogether. But for that young food plotter that's just starting, that doesn't have a lot of equipment, this stuff can't be broadcasted. The spacing has to be right. How many day corn is this? 109? Yeah,
it's 109-day corn.
So,
but Terry, you hit on something really big there when you talk about livestock feed. One question that I've gotten a couple times talking to people about this corn is, if it's so good, why aren't the farmers growing it? And the reason for it is this corn is only going to yield about 80 to 90% of what today's hybrids will yield. And the farmers just aren't going to give up because, they're paid by the bushel. They're not going to get a premium for this corn. However, these guys that are feeding their own livestock, I was on a farm out in Iowa and doing a consulting visit with this Amish farmer who had a big barn full of laying hens. He grows all his own food, or his grains that he grinds up to feed these chickens. And I was telling him about the Nutri-Crave corn, and he was all about it and wanted me to send him the info on it and such. So, definitely you could save money on your livestock rations because you don't have to buy as much protein. Protein is the expensive ingredient in livestock rations.
Right.
Well, when you've got more protein in your corn than you typically have, you don't have to buy as much protein to add with it. Then you add all the other nutrients that are at higher levels. And it's definitely a better corn for feeding livestock or deer.
Yeah, I know that question comes up a lot as they say, well, if real world beans were so good, why aren't farmers planting it? It's very simple. It's a blend of 4 beans, and farmers don't need shatter resistance into February. They need shatter resistance of 1 variety of beans so that field turns and they can get it out of the field as quickly as possible. They don't want a 4-bean blend that's out there. So kind of same with this. If you go to the website, you're going to see a side-by-side comparison of the Nutri-Crave corn next to field corn that was within yards of each other on your property. And you'll notice the field hybrid is a little bit bigger, but you're going to see a big color difference, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, you can just look at the ear, and I can look at 2 ears of one Nutri-Crave corn and one not. I can tell you which one's which every single time, and anybody could. The color difference, the corn's a real pale yellow, where this Nutri-Crave corn is almost a deep orange color.
Yeah. So again, the pilot program, there's a limited supply of what we have this year. It's not because we're trying to do something funky with it. I promise you that every other company in the food plot business would have released this multiple years ago on both sides if they could have. The testing that took us to this point has been very extensive, but we're still going to keep control over how much and where this stuff goes to ensure that everybody in the future that buys this that has our real world name on it knows that they're getting a proven product. So currently the products are on the real world website. Your local dealer has been made aware of these products, and they are they're allowed to order a very limited supply. So if you're buddies with one of your local dealers and you want to get it from him, you better call him because the dealer orders are coming in, and tell them that you want some, or you can order it online for us, but we're actually limiting it to 2 acres per person. And we're tracking that, so it's not a matter of being able to get a lot of this stuff in one location. So we're going to keep tabs of where it goes. Very limited supply. I promise you, we're not making a lot of money off of this year. This is for us to verify that this is the product that we want to put our name on long term, and be another flagship product in our product line. So we hope that the people that it helps solve a problem for, is another tool in the toolbox.
For sure.
All right,
I think we can take our food plots to the next level with these products.
Absolutely. So Enlist soybeans, there's going to be still a regular blend and a northern blend, just like our Gen 2. It follows the same map. And then the Nutri-Crave corn is a 109-day corn. As of right now, it's a non-GMO, but we are working on a Roundup Ready type variety that we can offer inside of this. So that's where we're at right now. So we're not going to waste any more time being a real-world commercial, but that's what's going on. Is it okay to switch over to our lessons learned by a research herd for tonight?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Tonight I'm going to talk about bucks losing weight during the rut. I think we talked about that. The topic came up last week. I don't remember if it was in a question that was submitted or how we got on that topic, but there's the idea that's floated around the hunting industry through magazine articles and such for a long time that bucks will lose a lot of weight during the rut, and then they go on a feeding binge, or that's how the story goes, that they regain that lost weight, that they start feeding heavier after the rut. And I'm telling you that's just not what happens. What I learned through the research herd was the bucks definitely lose weight during the rut, 20% or maybe even more in some cases. But from what I've seen, those bucks do not put that weight back on until the spring. They start to, putting weight back on, and that weight that they lose, it's gone till spring. And the buck's appetite does not come back after the rut like it was before the rut. It's really interesting, that during the winter months, such as right now on warmer days, the bucks eat very little. Actually, the entire deer herd eats very little. They almost go into a hibernation or dormant state. Well, sure, they still feed, but not near to the level they do in the fall. A good example, I remember one time I had a certain group of bucks in a pen, and I don't remember now how many there was, but I remember that I was taking those bucks during the late summer and early fall. They were eating 2 full 5-gallon buckets of feed a day. And, as the rut came on, they backed off the feed. And by the time winter rolled around, those bucks were eating about less than 1 bucket. It was probably more like 2/3 or 3/4 of 1 bucket on average. And some days they didn't eat that. Some days those bucks that were eating 2 full buckets did not eat a half a bucket of feed when the weather was warm. Now, in the winter time, when the weather gets really bad, it gets really cold, they do eat a whole lot more on those days. Those are the days when you look out in your soybean plot and every deer on the farm is standing in that plot in the afternoon gorging on those soybeans. Weather dictates that more than anything. But, the idea that after the rut, the bucks get back on the feed to regain that weight is just a fallacy. That weight doesn't come back until spring.
So, and this wasn't planned to tie back, but when we can offer food plot products that are higher in fat and oils and calories in that lower amount of food that they're eating as they're trying to recover is even more important. It's like quality mineral. When they're only intaking so much of it, the more bang for our buck of what they get in them, the better off we are at getting nutrients in that deer. Well,
and that's a great point, Terry. And I never even thought about the connection there with the Nutri-Crave corn. But, if a deer's only out there eating and he's only eating, say, 6 ounces of corn, if that 6 ounces has twice the calories in it or more than twice the calories, it's going to be better for that animal.
So when you had your captive deer and you've had cattle, cattle will get up and eat to generate heat inside their body. That's part of the way that cattle are made to live out, in the open and deal with bitter cold. I watch some YouTube channels of these guys that raise cattle up in, the Dakotas and Montana, but they're constantly eating as a way to generate heat. So is that kind of how a deer works too? When you say the temperatures drop and they're out in those soybeans eating, is that them trying to stay warm? Is that what that's driven from?
Well, I'm sure it's very similar. However, I had cattle long before I ever had these captive deer. I've had livestock my entire life. I showed livestock as a kid in 4-H and FFA, and long before I had deer. And when I first got my deer, I thought, I knew a little bit about. I thought I knew a lot, but I knew a little bit about feeding cattle and developing feed rations for cattle and livestock. And I thought, I'll get me some captive deer, and I'll be able to grow some giant bucks just by what I feed them. I thought I could, pump the high-powered feed into them, high protein levels and such, and I'd have giant bucks. Well, I learned that cattle and deer are 2 different things, and you definitely do not feed deer the same way you feed cattle. And I remember some of the first deer I had the runs for about 3 years until I figured out that I didn't know what I was doing. I better change some things. But they do use that food does generate heat as it digests through their system.
So, it's pretty cool to understand that, basically post-rut, those, the does are eating and consuming what they can as part of God's creation for developing that fetus inside of her. The buck's just simply trying to recover and stay alive. He's in survival mode, basically.
Right. Yep.
So, very cool. So, all right. Well, next week we'll have another edition of Lessons from a Research Herd. But I think it's time for us to move on to the buyafarm.com Property of the Week.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, this week's featured property is 487 acres, all wooded. It's in Alexander County, Illinois, near Tams. That's in southern Illinois. This property borders the Shawnee National Forest. In fact, there's over 2 miles of property line that borders the National Forest. The property has, excellent hunting for deer and turkey, marketable timber. You got access to the Shawnee National Forest, so you could go through this property and right on to the National Forest where hunting is allowed, giving you better access than people that would have to come in from another direction. The crazy thing about this property is it's 487 acres, but the taxes on it are only $460. It's not even $1 an acre.
Is that because so much of it's wooded? It's not tillable?
Yeah.
The tax rate's down?
Right.
Gotcha.
And there's not much income, although there is some marketable timber. But, I don't know that I've ever seen a property that's almost 500 acres and it's all woods.
Yeah.
Especially in Illinois, but,
Exactly.
here's one. If you're interested, you can call Agent Mark Kennedy. Mark's phone number is 618-924-1747.
Yeah, so you're actually it's gonna hunt bigger than what it is, even though it's almost 500 acres, because it's got so much basically blocked off to the national forest. So either think about pulling those deer off the forest to you, or your property hunts bigger because you control the access for over 2 miles. That sounds like a pretty rare property.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a good property for several people to go together and buy, or maybe someone who logs timber could buy it and then subdivide it into smaller tracts and resell it. There's just all kinds of options there.
All right, so very cool. Go to buyafarm.com, search Alexander County, Illinois for a 487 wooded acre property next to the Shawnee National Forest. So go check out our friends at buyafarm.com. So, all right, with that, do we have any questions lined up for tonight, Don?
We do. We got a couple of really good ones, Terry.
Okay.
So I'm going to get right on them. The first one is submitted by Kurt Myers from Washington, Pennsylvania. Kurt says, why do you think that male only grew 4 inches between years? Was it weather related, nutrition related? Did you see other bucks in the area also not jump much in size? Thanks in stock. I don't know what that means, but anyway, Kurt, I've seen a lot of bucks that, once they reach whatever size, that they pretty much stick close to it for several years. I remember a buck I shot a few years ago. I shot him as a 6-year-old, and he scored 176. But he had scored over 170 since the time he was 3. So 3, 4, 5, and 6, he was between 170 and 176. Hardly ever jumped at all. I don't think it has anything to do with weather. In Mel's case, I know it had nothing to do with nutrition, because he wintered on me last winter, and I had plenty of food in my plots. He fed on real world soybeans all winter, and had the Deadly Dozen plots and such.
He didn't roam till summertime and hunting season. He wintered on you
right.
the whole time.
Yep, at winter he stayed here, but the rest of the year you never knew where he was going to show up. So, but I don't think that it had anything at all to do with nutrition or weather. And the reason I don't think it was weather related is because the other buck I shot this year, Joey, he had his best rack ever at 8.5 years old. So, he grew from the previous year to grow his best rack ever. Now, Mel might have never got any bigger than what he was this year. Next year he might have been 215. He might have lost 5 inches. But on the other hand, he may have put on a growth spurt and added 20 more. You just never know. But I don't think it's that common for a buck to get to not put on that much between 3 and 4. Now, some of them put on a lot, but a lot of them don't.
Well, those few of us that were kind of along for the ride on the story of Mel knew that this was one of the reasons you were tormented so much with the decision whether to kill him this year or not.
Right.
Because he was so big as a 3-year-old, being 216, that, what's he going to be this year? And then when we saw him and, he had lost some of the non-typical stuff, it's like, okay, now what do we do? Are you going to go after him? Or are you going to give him another year? And a lot of factors played into that. And, it's just I think this is the part where, hunters that are managing their property, whether it's a 220-inch deer or a 140, there's no – I wish there was a guidebook that would say every deer is going to react this way from deer to deer, but I think it's really specific to them, and you have to make the decision that's part aligned with the journey and where you're at and the time you are in your career.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if it would have been a year where, 2 years ago, where everything was flooded and there was no food in the fields for a big portion of the spring and early summer, some people might say that it was because of food related that year, but we really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Just deer to deer, it's different.
That's right.
All right.
I appreciate your question, Kurt. So you'll be getting a Chasing Giants t-shirt. Next question is from Bob Miller from Bay City, Michigan. And apparently I had talked to Bob about this corn because his question was about the Nutri-Crave corn. And I figured it was a good time to pull out that question.
So Bob got an early preview of what we were coming out with one of Don's conversations.
Yeah, I remember talking to Bob, but I don't remember talking to him about the corn, but apparently I did because the question reflects it. So he says, let's talk corn. Don, you're testing with a new corn that is far more remarkable than everyday corn. Testing from 7% protein up to 11%, and saturated fats and oils from 3% to 12%. I read articles that talks about corn being terrible for a deer's digestive system, as it's harder to digest and acts as a stomach filler more than anything. Obviously beneficial, but what effect do you see this new corn type having on herd health-wise? Will it go toe-to-toe with real-world soybeans being high in oils and protein? And is this something you're going to plant more of and say a little less of beans and greens as it provides food, covering food? That's not the end of Bob's question, but he goes on to a different topic, and I want to answer this one first about the corn. The idea that corn can be terrible for a deer's digestive system, it's in this regard, it's similar to cattle. So if you would take cattle that have just been out on pasture and have not been getting any corn, and then start just giving them full corn, all they wanted, they would get a condition known as founder. And basically they would get sick from it, all kinds of different issues. Founder causes like their hooves to grow funny and real long. If you ever seen a ruminant with real long hooves, that's probably founder. He got into too much corn. Now, if you start them out slow on it and build them up to full feed, then they can handle full feed corn. It's the same way with deer. I mean, if you go into a place like, say, the north woods of Michigan or somewhere where there is no corn, the deer don't have corn in their diet, and then you pour out a big pile of it, well, yeah, they're going to get sick, you get acidosis, and it's not going to be good for them. In this case, the Nutri-Crave corn is obviously going to provide a lot more nutrient than regular corn. So it's definitely a good thing. As far as it going toe-to-toe with soybeans, I mean, there's no way any corn is going to go toe-to-toe with soybeans, because soybeans will have protein levels in the high 30s and pushing 40%. And we're bragging about 11% here on the Nutri-Grain or the Nutri-Crave corn. So, no, it's Not going to replace soybeans, but it is going to be. The other question was something I'm going to plant more of, and say a little less of beans and greens. Yeah, I'm going to plant. There's always going to be a plot of this corn on my place in the foreseeable future. As far as cutting back on soybeans, no, I'm not going to cut back on soybeans. What I've done is I've added some food plot acreage to my farm in the last year. I think I've talked about it in other episodes where I've got rid of my beef cattle, and which has allowed me to take some ground that I had in hay that I was cutting hay from and put it into deer habitat. And so it's allowed me to expand my food plot acreage. And some of that expanded acreage is definitely going to be in this corn.
But I think it gives you an additional level of diversity in your food plot, program on your farm, because there's going to be times that a deer is going to eat corn over something else. So do you want that deer walking across the road to eat on the neighbor's field corn, or are you going to have something that you want them there on your place? So I think it's more of a matter of offering more diversity, but inside of that diversity, offering the absolute best nutrients that you can.
Very well said, Terry. I guess we'll move on to the next part of Bob's
second
question.
Part of question here.
Yeah, actually, there's a third part. I think I'm going to do the second part, then we'll do the end of it. So, Bob says, Chapter 12, page 115 of your first book, you write, quote, "I believe everything I write, or I wouldn't write it. I might change my mind on some aspects of hunting mature bucks after I have experienced a few more hunting seasons. But what I write and believe is based on 3 decades of hunting experience." Since your book release in 2006, do you have 1 or 2 things you've tweaked since the writing of this, as you have another decade and a half of experience since this release? Almost everything you wrote back then is almost exactly word for word of what you share with us now, but maybe there is something you've perfected more. Thanks. There's one thing that jumps out at me, Bob. It's the late season. In fact, when I wrote my second book in 2012, I corrected my first book or my opinions on the late season that I wrote about in the first book. There's a chapter titled "Late is Great." And when I wrote the first book, I thought the late season was basically you had to have a prime property if you wanted to consistently kill mature bucks in the late season. What I've since learned is that it's quality food sources. That's what's going to really dictate your success in the late season. So that's the one change from when I wrote that first book. Anything you have to add there, Terry?
I think people just try to make it too complicated. Everybody's out there trying to sell a quick gimmick or something that makes it easy, whether it's a 2-bolt crossbow or something out there. The first thing that you always say in your master classes is you really got to simplify this. But one of the things that has changed since 2006 is our ability to document and show people what you're talking about with some of these same concepts through video, or Steve doing 3-dimensional graphics or some animations. I think it's a little bit easier for us to tell the story now.
Right.
Okay.
So moving on, I think this last part of Bob's question or comment, it's more of a comment. I think he's trying to be a comedian here, Terry.
Oh, no, I don't want to. Do I want to hear this?
You want to hear it.
Okay.
It's a good one. He says, P.S. You've killed a 200-inch buck out of a blind and out of a tree stand. So now's the perfect time to kill a 200-inch buck out of a love swing while shooting a crossbow that's dressed with a mechanical head. Ha, ha, ha. Just give people something to talk about. I know you've got a comment on this one. Bob, I can tell you that I will never hunt out of a love swing, and I will never hunt with a crossbow. Well, I can't say that about the crossbow. Well, I can say that I'll never use a mechanical broadhead, and I will never use a love swing.
I'm just laughing. That's funny. That brightened my day, Bob. Thank you. We used to tease Don that it was time for him to take selfie pictures with duck lips in the tree stand and send them to us for social media, and we still haven't seen that either. So,
well, you might see that before you see the love swing and the mechanical broadheads.
All right, one last question here. Let's go for tonight.
Last one comes from Bryson Duffy from Farmington, Arkansas. Bryson says, when it comes time to shed hunt, do you still maintain the sanctuaries on your property, or is that one time of year you're okay with human intrusion?
Wow,
I do go into my sanctuary. Yeah. I do go into my sanctuary, Bryson, to look for shed antlers, but the thing that I limit the times that I go in there, I try to go in just once. I'll wait till most of those antlers are shed and go in one time, rather than making multiple trips in. Just try to put as little pressure as possible on those sanctuaries.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned from Don, Bryson, he takes for granted a little bit sometimes how much people understand, but I'll leave my cameras soak a little bit longer now, because a lot of guys want to go in there and find that first shed as soon as they drop, but not all the antlers have dropped yet. So one of the things you can possibly do is, if you have your cameras on the perimeter, leave them out a little bit longer and don't go shed hunting until you stop seeing horn on deer. And the other thing that I've learned from Don is how to shed hunt. In other words, a lot of people just grid out and they walk through a property. One of the things that I've learned from Don is the direction that you walk as you sweep a property, if you're going to do it one time, is do it in either stages or do it strategic in directions where you're really not pushing the deer off of your property into the next section. Or, sometimes that's a little bit tougher when you have a big batch of connecting woods. But that really stuck out to me the times that I've been shed hunting on Don's property, is wait until you're sure that all of them have dropped, go in one time and be kind of methodical about the direction that you're going, to try to keep those deer on you and just bump them one time.
Good points. I forgot about that, Terry.
See, we got to force you to keep talking sometimes.
Yeah, when I go into the sanctuary, I'm pushing it in a direction that I'm pushing those deer in the most positive direction that I can. You never want to really push them off of your property, but you definitely don't want to push them in a direction where there's typically a lot of hunting pressure. So I guess that was something I do take for granted.
Yeah, so like last year you went in and you did some tree work and cut a bunch of stuff. So I know that some people with their hunting property, they have to cut firewood or they have to do other projects. Go in and do that in February and get it done and shed hunt it if you're going to shed hunt it. I can tell you that there is an 11-acre piece of property on my place that I've never even shed hunted. I've gone in there one time in 7 years, and that was to retrieve a buck that went in there and died. So I don't even go into shed hunt it. So, but good question. Maybe
that's probably the best approach is not to go in there. But I've got a good friend, Steve Blackmeyer, who had a property. He had a 40-acre sanctuary. He never goes into that 40 acres, not even shed hunt.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you there, Don. I don't know if you got the phone down on your shoulder or what. Can you repeat what you just said for me?
Yeah, I was saying that can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I've got a good friend, Steve Blackmeyer, who has a farm, and he's got a 40-acre tract on that farm, and he never goes into that 40 acres, not even to shed antler hunt.
So I know there's guys that are ate up with shed hunting, and that's a big part of it. But if I have to choose with finding a shed or killing a deer, I'm going to choose the killing the deer part. Even though it's so much fun when you can show the history and have the shed year after year. You know, like the Joey buck with you and Mel having those sheds, but you don't want to sacrifice pushing those deer off your property in order to find them. So
Right.
that actually might be a good video for you and Steve to produce, is take a couple different properties on the aerials and walk through how you would shed hunt it after you were sure that they were all dropped, just to try to push the right direction. I think people would be interested in that. So good idea, Bryson.
Well, that wraps it up for another week, Terry.
All right. So we appreciate everybody listening, especially since we don't have an ATA show to talk about the 2021 pilot program from Real World. I know it took up a couple minutes of the podcast, but we hope that it's going to be a value to land managers who are trying to take their property to the next level. And sorry we didn't get real fired up about the 2-bolt crossbow, but it's basically a joke. It's not really worth giving any more time to. So if our states are not going to stand up and do the right thing, then you have to trust that the hunters will. So outside of that, you're going to be able to see a lot of people in Northeast Ohio this week, and maybe I'll be up there too.
I hope you are, and I hope to meet a lot of our listeners up there. So if you do show up, make sure you stop by and introduce yourself.
Just out of curiosity, what's the seminar topic for this week?
Chasing giants. Believe it or not, it is chasing giants.
All right. So, all right. Well, with that, we thank everybody. This podcast train is going really, really far. I even got out of last week and didn't even mention that Don does have a pre-sale for Chasing Giants hats on his website. So these will ship out around the beginning of February. A bunch of people have gone on and ordered them. We really don't want to get into the apparel business, but so many of you are asking for it. We're trying to make you guys happy, but don't wait too long. We're not going to buy an extra bunch of these. So if you want a hat, get on there and order one. That helps us prepare. But the cool thing about this project is we could outsource these things to China and make money off hats. But there is a lady that has been a big help to Real World over the years. She has a side embroidery business, and she's bailed us out a couple times with QuickBook problems and stayed up overnight trying to help us with as we were growing as a company, and we're trying to help her grow her new embroidery business. So it's a win-win for everybody supporting a small business in East Tennessee. So if you want a Chasing Giants hat, please go to HigginsOutdoors.com. And they're on there with the T-shirts and the books in that area. Also, do us a favor. The best way you can help us is leave a review and comment on your podcast platform, or as this thing airs on Chasing Giants with Higgins Outdoors YouTube, you make sure you subscribe and share those with your friends. So with that, Don, why don't you take us out for episode 46?
All right, we want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, Matthews Archery, Lone Wolf Tree Stands, Vortex Optics, Real World Wildlife Products, 360 Hunting Blinds, and Quiet Cat. See you next episode.